Hello, here's some news, and there it goes. And here's some more news, and here's some Cruz. Last week was the anniversary of 9/11, which means it was also the anniversary of the day, 9/11, when United States Senator of Texas, Ted Cruz, liked a pornographic tweet depicting a woman who kind of looks like Ted Cruz's wife, who he once accidentally hit in the face right before accidentally elbowing her in the face, walking in on her stepdaughter getting railed by some guy. The woman, who kind of looks like Ted Cruz's wife, then proceeded to masturbate and ultimately join in with the happy couple. Upon everyone having quite a hoot at Ted Cruz's personal account liking this tweet on 9/11, Cruz blamed this activity on a staffing error and assured folks that the tweet has been reported to Twitter. Now, this is an odd response, partly because porn is allowed on Twitter, so not sure what you're reporting there, the malicious tweet that you liked. Now, Ted's claim that multiple people have access to his account, and it was an accidental like. Well, first of all, if true, maybe fire the guy who I'm pretty sure wants to f*** your wife. But also, if there are people with access to your account, and that's why they like the tweet, who are you following? How did that end up in your feed, Ted Cruz? Also, and this is important, it was definitely him who liked it, because Ted Cruz lives on Twitter. I should know. So do I. Ted Cruz has two different Twitter accounts. His official senator account, Send Ted Cruz, verified, and his personal account, the one that liked the porn on 9/11, Ted Cruz, also verified. His senator account is the one that would have staff tweeting for him. And all you need to do is look at his personal account's tweets, which we will, and you know, it's him. Now, I could point out what a hypocrite Ted Cruz is, as if that would change anything, and mention that he once argued, legally, against the idea of masturbation to ban sex toys. And I quote, "There is no substantive due process right to stimulate one's genitals for non-medical purposes unrelated to procreation or outside of an interpersonal relationship." Ah yes, the law. But this video isn't about Ted Cruz or his staff liking a porn tweet from his personal non-US senator account on 9/11. This is about Ted Cruz's swift descent into being a weird little online freak who spends his time as a US senator tweeting Daily Wire memes and challenging Alyssa Milano to debates. And the crux of the video, trolling college students until they make their accounts private. He, and congressmen like him, are trying to be the Trump-style culture warrior bullies of no substance. You know, the kind of thing that beat Ted Cruz into submission. Just toxic nonsense. Like how Trump said his wife is ugly and called him a pussy. Well, now Ted can get in on the action. For example, if Trevor Noah does a segment about how gender reveal parties are silly and could be seen as offensive since the child hasn't actually chosen their gender yet, Ted Cruz might, like a weird little online freak who forgets that he's a senator, quote tweet that by saying liberal males do tend to not grow balls. We could spend some time talking about how sex isn't the same thing as gender, or we could talk about the idea of Ted Cruz saying someone doesn't have any balls. But maybe we'll save that for the end. It's just a small example of little Ted. Another great example of this evolution of the GOP into a bunch of weird little online freaks is from Trump sycophant and normal head haver Matt Gaetz. John Cryer of 2.5 Men tweeted, "Rep. Matt Gaetz invited a white supremacist to the State of the Union, attempted to intimidate a federal witness, and endorsed a sociopathic bigot who applauded the deaths of migrants for Congress." Now, in response to these true things that a normal congressperson might want to either explain or deny, Matt tweeted, "Charlie Sheen carried 2.5 Men, utter nonsense, from a congressperson, in response to the fact that he invited a white supremacist to the State of the Union." Now, in response to this, instead of being like, "Why did you say that?" instead of responding to the accurate claims, John's ego got hurt, and so he talked about how many Emmys he won after Sheen left the show, so good shit all around, I guess. But this is the kind of thing our lawmakers spend their time on these days. Trying to be the Trump Twitter troll, just dunking on Bette Midler or whatever, instead of, you know, being a senator. The same week of the anniversary of Ted Cruz liking a porn tweet on the anniversary of 9/11, Donald Trump released his list of possible Supreme Court picks if he wins again. Ted Cruz was on that list. Now, there's a lot to unpack about that. For example, the original list that Donald Trump gave years ago for his potential Supreme Court picks didn't have Gorsuch or Kavanaugh on that list. So this is just a list of names. Also, Ted Cruz at that time pledged to keep the Supreme Court seat open for 4 years if Hillary won, because he's a vile worm. Also, pretty sure this was simply a favor to Ted because he had a book about the Supreme Court coming out. And so on the same day the list was released, Ted was like, buy my book. Also, Ted Cruz has since responded to this by saying that he's honored to be on the list because he really cares about Donald Trump's opinion about him and his wife and so on. But he doesn't see himself on the Supreme Court. He wants to stay in the fight, in the Senate. That's what he sees himself spending years in the Senate, fighting the good fight. Now, this is extra interesting because one of the things that Ted Cruz and Donald Trump agree on as a team is that there should be term limits on Congress. Not the worst idea. Donald Trump put this promise at the top of his list of promises in 2016. That promise remains on the 2020 platform for the GOP because he didn't do anything about it, despite the fact that Ted Cruz has written an amendment to limit terms in Congress. Of course, the amendment that Ted Cruz wrote doesn't include Congress people who have already exceeded those limits, so if you've been in Congress for like 5 terms, the limit to 2 terms wouldn't take effect until the next term, so you could get another term. Very clever, Ted. Clever boy. Anyway, that amendment was written and ready to go 4 years ago. But Ted didn't bring it up at all or try to pass it at all because Ted Cruz is a lying fraud worm who doesn't believe in much of anything. He wants to be fighting the good fight in the Senate for years. That's where he sees himself. Also, there should be term limits for Congress, but also he's going to be there for years fighting the good fight. Anyway, we could spend hours going balls deep into Ted Cruz's rich history of obvious hypocrisy and all the things he said about Donald Trump being horrible and how he pretends he didn't and that it's all good now and his record and his AstroTurf Tea Party movement and how he helped steal the 2000 election from George W. Bush and how he was openly disliked by everyone in politics regardless of party. And maybe we will do that when he's up for re-election, despite, his view on term limits. But that's not what this is about. So instead, before the real point of this, here's just a quick rundown of some of his weird little freaky tweets. Like his tweets about f***ing Goya beans and how the left is trying to silence free speech by boycotting them, even though, boycotts are a form of free speech. And also, the president that Ted Cruz loves tries to cancel Nike and, f***ing Barbara Streisand twice a f***ing week. Weird that Ted Cruz, champion of free speech, has nothing to say about the president saying that if you burn the American flag, you should go to jail for a year.
You burn the flag, you should go to jail for 1 year. I really mean that.
Here's Ted Cruz challenging an actor to wrestle someone who isn't Ted Cruz. Here he is commenting, "Communists!" on an article that suggests trying other foods on holidays. Ted has developed a habit of regularly retweeting Andy Ngo, a blatant fraud and fascist propagandist who is such an obvious fraud that he pretended to have a fake British accent for several months.
I've attended mandatory training on social justice and media, and I've been taught about factoring in power dynamics of people.
Portland, Oregon is a extremely progressive city in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. And I call it a political monoculture.
Here he is retweeting videos of a swan pulling someone's mask on and calling the swan a goose. Here he is retweeting a lie about how Bank of America is donating $1 billion to Black Lives Matter, a thing they weren't doing. Here he is tweeting out Antifa.com, which links to a Joe Biden donation page. Thanks for the link, Ted. And he pretends as though he doesn't understand that it's an obvious troll website and Antifa and Joe Biden are completely not related. This makes sense, though, considering free speech hero Ted Cruz wrote a law trying to label Antifa terrorists to stop them from protesting, and his law used Antifa and left-wing activism interchangeably because he's a fascist goon and he wants to blur the lines. It's a shame that environmentalism in America is exclusively seen as left-wing. Hope your law isn't used irresponsibly, Ted. You'd hate that. Here's Ted digging up a 2-year-old tweet from Jim Acosta to say that people want to destroy Mount Rushmore, while also claiming that the protests are full of raping, murderous Antifa. Gonna need a link for those rapes, Ted. The raping Antifa, who you liken to left-wing activism and any Democrat. Here he is asking why anyone would elect these goofballs in Congress with masks on their faces, despite this existing. Here he is claiming that someone is defending child porn despite that person not doing that. Because again, he wants to blur the lines and has no concern about getting people murdered. Here he is posting about how some angry lefty actor thinks California is the only place that has summer. It's hot everywhere. Try Texas every summertime. But the rest of the country doesn't have such a dysfunctional state government that you can't turn the lights on or run AC. That's a policy failure of the Dems. Despite this article from a year earlier, almost to the day, which reads, "The Energy Reliability Council of Texas appealed to all of the state's consumers of electric power to limit and reduce their usage during the peak demand hours of 3 to 7 p.m. Tuesday after reserve capacity fell below 2,300 megawatts. High temperatures have resulted in record electricity demand over the last few days and may result in a new record today," said ERCOT President and CEO Bill Magnus. "Consumers can help lower energy consumption by taking some simple actions between the hours of 3 and 7 p.m. While defending the claim that Trump is untouchable by the law, which, oh boy, I mean, maybe, I don't know, Ted told Lawrence Tribe, "Trump has broken you," which, funny stuff, Ted. Here's Ted Cruz retweeting a Muppet tweet about how love is love, you can love who you want, and claiming that it's about sex? A thing the 9/11 porn tweet liker loves to do. See, for the past few days, Ted Cruz has been obsessively tweeting about something on Netflix called Cuties, which is about how the sexual exploitation of young girls is bad, something I think we can all agree on. Now, some scenes and images from the movie are pretty gross and not something I'm going to show you. And I'm sure there's an actual reasonable conversation to be had about this. But Ted Cruz is using this as an opportunity to paint all lefties as pedophiles who support child porn, as seen earlier in that other tweet, despite that not being a thing that is happening. And despite the current president having an entire page in Jeffrey Epstein's Little Black Book, images like this with his young daughter, bragging about walking into the changing room of teen beauty queens, more than one Trump campaign chair pleading guilty to charges of sex trafficking, the 8-year Republican Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, being a convicted pedophile, Ted Cruz retweeting James Woods, who tried to pick up Amber Tamblyn when she was 16 and he knew she was 16, and Ted Cruz himself defending child molester Roy Moore. Also, decades of actual pageants of actual young girls doing this shit. For real, a lot of them in Texas. But Ted Cruz doesn't care because he's a wormy little troll who can't log the off. In response to people saying he's just throwing red meat to Trump's QAnon base, Ted is baffled by this, despite, having retweeted a very popular QAnon account very recently. Now, these swans are geese and challenging a random actor to wrestle one of his colleagues for him tweets are all tweets that are still up. I haven't gotten to the deleted tweets, like him retweeting liar and known plagiarist Benny Johnson claiming that the gun-toting couple from that thing, you know the thing, how they were both BLM-supporting Democrats, a thing that they are not. Because the real deleted tweets I'd like to get to are here. On a random night online back in January, when much of the country was asleep, Ted Cruz was busy being a weird little online freak and name-searching himself. He found a single tweet from some young college student who tweeted about how you know you're in the wrong when Ted Cruz agrees with you. It was a quote tweet of a Ricky Gervais tweet about free speech. Now, the college student shared a screenshot of the tweet, did not tag Ted Cruz, and the tweet had gotten no more than 6 likes. But Ted Cruz was being busy, being a weird little online freak, and thus he found this tweet 9 minutes later, and retweeted it to his hundreds of thousands of weirdo followers. After a few minutes of his followers harassing her, Ted tweeted, "Weird. I affirmed and agreed with her right to express her lefty views, and she blocked me for saying that. This exchange sums up 2020 perfectly." Now, aside from the president blocking tons of people on Twitter, and also who cares, but also, she didn't block you, Ted. I mean, who would blame her? But what she did was make her account private because of all the harassment you directed at her. after someone pointed this out to him, or just after having a single thought for a fucking second, Ted quietly deleted those tweets. Not a word, not an apology, not a mention after that night. And ultimately, I guess this isn't really important. I mean, it's stupid. He's stupid and vile and pathetic. But like, I don't know, kind of wish someone would ask him about how he name searched himself and then harassed some random student for no reason, and then doubled down and pretended not to know why she would make her account private, and then deleted those tweets without a word, and then continued down his path of being a weird little online freak. So I guess I actually agree with Ted on this. This exchange sums up 2020 perfectly. Much like Ted Cruz summed up 2016 perfectly. At the RNC in 2016, when it was expected that Ted Cruz would finally endorse Donald Trump, he went out and he told everybody, in a Weasley way that would grant him plausible deniability, to not vote for Donald Trump. He talked about what the party used to be and the great things that they were capable of. And then he said in November,
vote your conscience.
Vote for Republicans up and down the ballot. He never said vote for Trump. He was telling people that Trump is bad and you should follow your conscience and not vote for him. Vote for Republicans down ballot, but don't vote for Donald Trump. Then he got booed, and everybody saw it.
Up and down the ticket who you trust to defend our freedom and to be faithful to the Constitution.
And a short time after, we got this. A beautiful visual metaphor of a sweaty, desperate, ballless, and ovaryless Ted Cruz, who had completed his transformation into a vile worm, who would rather spend his time dunking on Alyssa Milano and calling swans geese, instead of being a senator. We've talked a lot on this show about how Donald Trump didn't cause our problems. He's a symptom of many of our problems. He exacerbates our problems. But this perpetually online culture war bully shit, that's Trump, man. He did this. He broke Ted Cruz. Now, of course, Cruz was always a little worm on the inside. But boy, did Trump bring it out of him after beating him into submission and showing him that a true leader, a real patriot and representative, spends his days quoting The Princess Bride and complaining about Goya fucking beans. Anyway, pointless episode. Bye.
I'm Ted Cruz. I love me some porn.
Hi, thanks for watching this weird short episode about how Ted Cruz is a weird little online freak. Like and subscribe the video and to the channel. Check out our patreon.com/somemore-news. We've also got a podcast called Even More News. We've also got other stuff. I don't know, links, merch, who knows. Thanks for watching, Ted.